Eunho stood before the statue, his gaze distant, as if his thoughts reached far beyond the stone figure in front of him. The silence of the night had done little to calm his restless spirit, drawing him back to this place again, where memories and musings could take hold. Lost in contemplation, he barely noticed when Liryang approached, accompanied by an elder with a presence both weathered and wise. Liryang's respectful greeting carried a hint of playful familiarity, noting Eunho's restless night and clear desire to linger here. The elder, taking in Eunho's quiet stature, seemed to measure the young man in his mind, his gaze sharpening with recognition. He remembered the tales, the ones where Eunho had stood firm and undeterred, even when faced with the defiance of a proud opponent during the Namgung clan elder's funeral. Eunho's decisive actions and unyielding strength had swiftly dismantled that arrogance, leaving a lasting impression on those who bore witness. The elder's tone held a wistful admiration, silently expressing his wish to have been present during that confrontation. Eunho's reputation had spread quickly, carving his name into the memory of the clans and elders alike. Though the elder's regret was evident, so was the silent respect as he now observed the young master of Cheonhajang, who had shown himself to be more than just a powerful, but a force capable of shaking the foundations of tradition and pride. Liryang, with an air of enthusiasm, introduced the elder who accompanied him, a scholarly figure named Jin Yongjin, known for his expertise in writing manuscripts. Yongjin was a close companion of Liryang's teacher, and this connection had prompted Liryang to bring him along for a brief exchange with Eunho. With a modest bow, Eunho offered his own introduction, underscoring his actions with a humility that belied the reputation he had gained. Fame had never been his goal. Rather, it was an inevitable byproduct of the events that had unfolded. Yongjin acknowledged Eunho's words with a knowing smile, remarking on the smallness of the human world, even amid its vastness, a sentiment steeped in the quiet wisdom of his years. He then turned his attention back to Eunho, an inquisitive light in his gaze, and posed a question that had been stirring within him. The scholar's curiosity stemmed from observing Eunho's silent vigil by the statue. Noting the intensity with which Eunho regarded it, he wondered aloud what had drawn the young man into such a deep state of reflection. Eunho's response was unadorned and direct. His words hinted that there was nothing complex about his gaze, merely a quiet recognition of Yeongbin's lifelike depiction, faithfully captured in the stone. Yongjin's eyes widened in surprise, followed by a spark of excitement. It thrilled him to think that Eunho, despite his youth, recognized Yeongbin. For Yongjin, the figure of Yeongbin held legendary significance. A warrior who had once been the mightiest in heaven, cleansing both realms of a great evil that had threatened them. His reverence for this ancient hero was evident as he eagerly shared his knowledge, hoping to kindle a similar admiration in Eunho. But Eunho, with his characteristic directness, seemed unfazed by the grandeur surrounding Yeongbin's legacy. Instead, he offered an almost casual remark about the warrior's notorious temper. A comment that drew a swift, exasperated reaction from Liryang. Caught off guard, Liryang was quick to scold Eunho, his expression laced with worry as he glanced nervously at Yongjin, anxious that the elder might take offense. In his flustered state, Liryang scrambled to reframe Eunho's words, attempting to smooth over any potential misunderstanding. He explained hastily that Eunho had intended to praise Yeongbin's bravery, that his words had merely come out wrong. Liryang's frantic apology was almost endearing, his loyalty and respect for both Eunho and Yongjin apparent, as he tried to bridge the gap between their differing impressions of the legendary warrior. To Liryang's surprise, Yongjin did not react with the slightest hint of offense. Instead, the elder broke into hearty laughter, clearly delighted by Eunho's insight. Yongjin's admiration grew as he praised Eunho, marveling at the young master's unusual knowledge. It was rare for anyone to recognize the subtleties of Yeongbin's character, especially his fiery temper, a trait often omitted or forgotten in ancient records. Yongjin, well-versed in Taoist teachings and the finer details of lore, found it refreshing to meet someone who could see past the revered warrior's accolades to the complex individual beneath. Eunho, however, responded with a quiet sigh, inwardly reflecting on Yongjin's words. Despite the elder's praise, Eunho knew his understanding of Yeongbin went beyond the old manuscripts, which were often vague or incomplete. His thoughts drifted momentarily as he considered the vast difference between what was recorded and what he himself knew. Yang, eyes sparkling with a newfound enthusiasm, suggested they continue their conversation amidst the tranquil beauty of Mudong Mountain's nightscape. He spoke with a reverent appreciation for the mountain, his tone revealing how much he valued the serenity of this place after dark. To him, the mountain's nighttime charm held a magic all its own, one that invited contemplation and deeper connection. Yet, as the elder's invitation lingered in the air, Eunho found himself suppressing a weary sigh. The weight of the evening's exchanges and his own internal musings had left him unexpectedly drained, and though he appreciated the elder's sincerity, a sense of fatigue began to settle over him. Still, he maintained his composure, aware that Yangjin's company would demand patience and attentiveness a little while longer. As they strolled beneath the starlit sky, Eunho and Yangjin encountered a pair of young Taoists moving quietly along the mountain path. Yangjin's sharp gaze caught sight of them, and, with the authority of a seasoned elder, he wasted no time in reproaching the disciples for wandering at such a late hour. His voice, though laced with discipline, carried a touch of the familiar warmth with which he addressed the younger generation, reminding them of the importance of rest. Even the divine spirit, he noted, had its hours of repose. The young Taoists bowed respectfully, hastily offering an explanation of their intentions. Yet, Yangjin's firm response left no room for protest, and the chastised disciples hurried away, exchanging muttered words between themselves as they disappeared into the night. One of them, clearly annoyed, softly chided his friend, as if to say he'd known better than to venture down this particular path at such an hour. Liryang's eyes widened in disbelief as Yangjin casually mentioned a divine spirit. The elder's words held an unexpected weight, hinting at something beyond the usual Taoist teachings. Observing Liryang's stunned expression, Yangjin elaborated with a knowing smile, suggesting that there was indeed a shrine within the mountain dedicated to the worship of yokai, a concept that left Liryang visibly unsettled. The young Taoist struggled to reconcile the idea of such a place with his own strict upbringing, finding it almost unthinkable. Yangjin's gentle acknowledgement of Liryang's reaction showed his awareness of how difficult this revelation might be for those bound to orthodox paths, especially for followers of Taoist traditions. Sensing the tension, Eunho joined the conversation, curious as to why this notion would be so challenging. In response, Liryang stiffened, mentioning his allegiance to the Dorm faction, a detail that seemed to add layers of conflict to his understanding. Eunho listened with mild intrigue, the mention of Dorm striking a faint chord in his memory. He found himself pondering the familiarity of the name, as if it were something he had encountered before yet couldn't quite place. Yangjin led them through the darkened mountain paths toward the hidden shrine, his voice carrying an air of mystery as he recounted the history behind it. In a distant time, he explained, the boundaries between the human and spirit realms had been fragile, barely distinguishable. It was during this era of blurred realities that the Dorm faction had emerged, formed by shamans devoted to protecting humanity through the exorcism of yokai. Even now, Dorm maintained its vigilance, believing that the barrier between realms was thin, prone to fading at any moment. Their teachings warned that no one could predict when spirits might cross into the human world once again. In this respect, the Dorm stance was understandable, yet their strict doctrine made the idea of honoring yokai, even through a mere shrine, utterly unthinkable. Liryang's reaction was swift and sharp, his voice tinged with irritation as he expressed his loyalty to Dorm's traditional beliefs. For him, yokai were a threat to be confronted and eradicated, and the shamans had long been champions of that cause. His view was rooted in a deep respect for the shaman's legacy and a sense of duty to uphold it. The notion of a shrine dedicated to yokai felt like an affront to all that the Dorm faction stood for. Yangjin, undeterred by Liryang's frustration, responded with measured calm. He spoke of this particular yokai, hinting that it was unlike others, that it had a significance beyond the typical enmity humans held toward spirits. But Liryang's mind was set, the ingrained beliefs of Dorm too entrenched to be swayed easily. To him, a yokai was still a yokai regardless of any unique qualities it might possess. As Yangjin and Liryang continued their exchange, Eunho walked silently beside them, his thoughts turning inward. The notion of a different kind of yokai intrigued him, stirring faint memories of stories he had encountered over the years. He knew there had been yokai who defied their darker instincts, who forbade cannibalism and sought genuine kinship with humans. Yet, Even among such rare spirits, he had never heard of a shaman, especially one tasked with eradicating yokai, going so far as to build a shrine in their honor. The mystery lingered in Eunho's mind, filling him with a quiet curiosity. The possibilities seemed few, yet something about the elder's words resonated as if he should already know the answer. Who could this yokai be? As they reached the shrine, the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken tension. The dim light of the lanterns flickered, casting long shadows over the ancient stone steps that led to the heart of the shrine. Inside, the first thing that caught Eunho's attention was a large, intricate painting hanging on the wall. The image depicted a yokai, poised with a graceful elegance, holding a book in one hand, its posture noble yet hauntingly serene. Eunho stopped in his tracks, his breath momentarily catching in his chest. His gaze fixed on the painting, eyes widening in disbelief. A sense of déjà vu washed over him as he studied the figure. The resemblance was uncanny. Its features, its stance. Something about it stirred a deep, unsettling recognition within him. It was as though the painted yokai were not just a depiction of some distant legend, but a reflection of himself. A strange, almost impossible thought flitted through his mind, one that he could scarcely believe. The familiar feeling twisted in his gut as he took another step closer, his mind racing with questions. Could it be? Was this truly him? Standing before the shrine, its grandeur matched only by the weight of its history, Yangjin's voice reverberated with reverence as he shared the tale of the shrine's origins. His words carried the gravity of ancient tradition, recounting how Zhang Sambongjin, a legendary figure in shamanic lore, had left behind a priceless treasure, a manifestation of the universe's essence itself. However, when Zhang Sambongjin had mysteriously vanished, the treasure disappeared with him, leaving the ancestors of the shamanic lineage in a state of despair. It was in the midst of this uncertainty that a yokai, one who had ascended from the spirit realm to the human world, had appeared. The yokai, a fox spirit, had brought the treasure back, only to leave without allowing the ancestors the chance to offer their thanks. Yangjin's pride swelled as he spoke of how the shamanic ancestors, moved by the yokai's benevolence, had honored him as the divine spirit, a protector of all treasures. To express their gratitude, they had built the very shrine they now stood in, establishing sacred practices, such as the prohibition of consuming meat, as a gesture of respect toward the spirit who had ensured their survival. Liang, absorbing the explanation, stood in silent contemplation before replying with newfound understanding. His thoughts shifted from his initial condemnation of yokai to acceptance, as he reflected on the benevolence of the fox spirit who had safeguarded the shamanic lineage. He looked toward Eunho with a sense of admiration, convinced that this was indeed a story worthy of reverence. But Eunho, in contrast, felt a wave of discomfort. His eyes were still fixed on the painting of the yokai that adorned the shrine, its form eerily familiar. The image depicted a version of him as a yokai, the fox spirit whose story Yangjin had just recounted. Embarrassment and frustration twisted within him. The tale, though beautifully told, was far from the truth. The image of the spirit on the wall felt like an intrusion into a past he wished to forget, a past that was being romanticized and misrepresented. His thoughts raced with a sense of annoyance, though he kept his feelings locked away, unable to voice his frustrations aloud. The story in his mind was more fiction than fact, and yet, he could do nothing but stand there, inwardly lamenting how it had been so completely distorted. A few centuries prior, in a time long before the figure standing before the shrine, Eunho had been a very different being, still a yokai, wandering through the world in search of purpose. His journey had brought him to the gates of the Mudong sect, a place shrouded in mystery and steeped in ancient tradition. As he arrived, the tall, imposing mountain loomed before him. Eunho stood there for a moment, taking in his surroundings. The air was thick with the presence of spiritual energy, and the scent of incense lingered in the breeze, mingling with the earthy scent of the mountain. He scanned the landscape, his sharp eyes flicking from the towering structures to the quiet paths winding through the grounds. Finally, he spoke aloud to himself, breaking the silence, marking his arrival at the heart of a powerful and enigmatic sect.